The explosion tore through the night like thunder. Flames crawled up the side of Karen's white SUV, tainting her face red with panic as she screamed for help. I was already on the ground, my hands covered in blood. I didn't even know whose. The smell of gasoline mixed with burnt rubber made it hard to breathe. Neighbors rushed out, phones in hand, filming instead of helping. And then I saw it, a figure standing in the smoke, staring right at me, motionless, silent. For a moment I thought it was death itself. Every second it stood there felt like a countdown. And as the sirens grew closer, one thought burned through my mind. This wasn't an accident. Someone wanted this to happen. Someone wanted me dead. But before you judge, before you think you know who's the villain here, listen to the full story. Because what happened before that fire, what led to this night, started with a parking spot. And by the time it was over, 3 people were in the hospital, 1 house was gone. And every secret I buried came crashing out. My name is Jack Hayes. I built this neighborhood from the ground up. And this is how the woman who tried to block my driveway almost destroyed everything I ever created. The fire that night didn't just destroy Karen's car. It burned the last piece of peace left in our neighborhood. But let me take you back to where it started. It was a bright, quiet morning, the kind where the world feels normal, before chaos finds its way in. I had just finished watering the lawn when I saw her for the first time, Karen Miller, the self-appointed queen of the HOA, blonde bob, clipboard in hand, and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She looked at my driveway like it was a crime scene. I still remember her first words, "You can't park there. It's against HOA policy." I laughed, thinking she was joking. I built those driveways. Every inch of concrete, every brick, every line of asphalt. I made this place, but Karen didn't care who I was. To her, power wasn't about creation. It was about control. That morning turned into an argument that would set the tone for everything that followed. She stood inches from me, pointing at the ground like it belonged to her. "You think you're special because you built it? Rules are rules." Her words echoed in my head long after she left. Later that week, I got my first violation notice. Unauthorized vehicle parking. She had filed it herself. I thought it was a misunderstanding, maybe just her being overly strict. But soon, it wasn't just my driveway. It was my fence height, my trash cans, my mailbox color. Every detail of my home became a weapon she used to break me down. And the strangest part? The neighbors started following her lead. They stopped waving. They whispered. I became an outsider in the place I created. Every HOA meeting turned into a courtroom, with Karen as the judge and me as the criminal. She loved the attention, the way everyone looked at her, and she spoke. I could see it in her eyes. This wasn't about the rules. It was about dominance, about proving she could control even the man who built her world. That's when I realized this wasn't going to stop with letters and fines. This was war. One night, I came home and found nails scattered across my driveway, dozens of them, shining in the moonlight. My tires were slashed. My front door was spray painted. Follow the rules. I called the police, but they shrugged it off. Neighbor disputes. Karen was standing across the street, watching, coffee cup in hand, smiling. That's when I started documenting everything. Every word, every action, every threat. And here's where it gets dark. I started digging into HOA records, and what I found wasn't just petty control. It was corruption, missing funds, illegal fees, faked maintenance costs. And guess whose signature was on every check? Karen's. She was stealing from everyone, right under their noses. I remember whispering to myself that night, "You picked the wrong man, Karen." But before I could act, before I could expose her, she struck first. My construction permits were suddenly revoked. My property was marked for inspection. And then came the anonymous letter. "You don't belong here anymore." Every day felt like walking on glass. The neighborhood I once loved was turning into a battlefield, and I wasn't sure who was on my side anymore. But here's where things start to twist, because what I did next, what I had to do, changed everything. Coming up, the moment I decided to fight back, the secret meeting that should never have happened, and how one hidden camera almost cost me my life. Because this story, it's just getting started. My name is Jack Hayes, the guy who built this neighborhood, and the man Karen Miller decided to declare war on. You'd think when someone tries to destroy what you created, you fight back with reason. Maybe a lawyer, maybe patience. But when it's your home, your blood in every brick, logic burns fast. The night after I found that note, "You don't belong here anymore." Something inside me cracked. I wasn't scared anymore. I was done being polite. I was done watching her smile while she poisoned everything I'd built. So I made a decision. If Karen wanted a war, I'd show her what real power looked like. At first, I tried to stay smart. I set up cameras, small, hidden ones, inside the shrubs, above the garage, even one behind the mailbox. I wanted proof. I wanted to see what she did when she thought no one was watching. The footage I caught that first week nearly made me laugh. She was obsessed. Karen would walk around my driveway at night with a flashlight, measuring tape in hand, whispering into her phone. I could see the reflection of her clipboard as she recorded details, muttering things like 2 inches past the line. Violation. It was like watching a predator stalk her prey, except her prey was a man who built her cage. But the second week, that's when I saw something different. Karen wasn't alone. There was a man with her. Dark hoodie, gloves, moving fast. He handed her something small, an envelope. She opened it, counted cash, and smiled. That was the moment everything clicked. She wasn't just drunk on control. She was getting paid. The HOA was her kingdom, and she was bleeding it dry 1 fee at a time. I stayed up all night replaying that footage. Rage became a heartbeat. Every tick of the clock whispered, "Get her." But revenge isn't about anger. It's about precision. So I waited. And while I waited, I made a plan. I started pulling the HOA financial reports. All public records, buried under layers of bureaucracy. Late at night, with coffee and hatred as fuel, I traced every transaction. Every fake maintenance payment, every fake repair invoice. All of it led back to her. Karen Miller had turned our neighborhood into a personal ATM. So, I did what any builder would do. I started to rebuild. Not houses this time, but her downfall. I printed everything. Dozens of pages, photos from the cameras, screenshots of checks, names of fake contractors. I kept it all in a single red folder, and on the cover, in black marker, I wrote one word: truth. Then came the moment that still haunts me. The HOA meeting. A full room, 40 people, the smell of coffee and tension thick in the air. Karen sat at the front, pretending to be calm, tapping her pen against the desk like a queen waiting to crush a rebellion. I walked in, folder in hand. Every eye turned. She smiled. That smug, rehearsed smile. "Oh, Mr. Hayes, come to file another complaint?" I didn't answer. I just walked to the front, opened the folder, and laid the papers on the table. One by one, the pages spread like wounds. "You want to talk about violations?" I said. "Let's start with these." For a second, silence, then murmurs. Heads turned toward Karen. She froze. Her face went pale. And then she did something I didn't expect. She laughed. "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice trembling just slightly. "Fabrications." But then someone in the crowd recognized one of the fake contractor names. It was his cousin's company. He stood up. "That's not real," he shouted. The room exploded. Voices collided. Karen's control cracked in front of everyone. I'd won. Or so I thought. Coming up, the moment that turned victory into horror. That night, someone broke into my garage. They didn't steal anything. They just left a single envelope on my workbench. Inside was a photo of me, asleep in my bed. The timestamp was from 2 hours earlier. No note, just proof that someone had been inside my house while I slept. I can still feel the way my heart stopped when I saw it. I called the police, again, but they didn't care. Could be a prank. A prank. I realized then that I was truly alone. Over the next week, strange things started happening. My mailbox was smashed. My water line cut. My wife started getting calls, silent ones, every night at 2:13 a.m. The HOA meeting stopped. Karen disappeared for a few days. Everyone acted like nothing had happened. But I could feel it. The quiet wasn't peace. It was pressure building before a storm. And then came the day that broke me. I woke up to the sound of construction outside. Karen had filed an emergency order to block my driveway, claiming I was violating property boundaries. The city crews were out there, drilling into the pavement I poured with my own hands. I ran out barefoot, shouting. Karen was there, sunglasses on, sipping her coffee. "You should have just followed the rules, Jack," she said, not even looking at me. I lost it. I grabbed the jackhammer from one of the workers and slammed it into the asphalt, tearing it apart before they could finish. Dust flew everywhere. People screamed. And when I looked up, Karen was filming. "Perfect," she whispered. "Now everyone will see who you really are. My name is Jack Hayes." The man she was destroying on camera was the same man who gave her everything she owned. And as the dust settled and the sirens wailed in the distance, I knew there was no going back. She'd turned the neighborhood against me, turned the system against me, and now she wanted to bury me under the concrete I built. But she made one mistake. She forgot who she was dealing with. I built this place. I know every line, every pipe, every wire, and if she wanted a war, I was about to bring her one she couldn't control. Coming up, the trap I set, the night I caught her in her own lies, and the secret that made her beg me for mercy. My name is Jack Hayes, and I built this neighborhood with my own hands. I know every crack in the pavement, every cable running under the lawns, every screw holding these homes together. That's how I knew exactly where to hide the truth. After the day she blocked my driveway, something inside me stopped caring about rules. I wasn't just defending my home anymore. I was hunting for proof, for justice, for closure. I wanted to expose Karen Miller not in private, not in whispers, but in front of every single person who had bowed to her fake authority. I started setting the stage. Cameras, recorders, sensors. I spent nights crawling under fences, wiring hidden microphones inside light posts, running cables through attic vents. I didn't just want to watch her. I wanted to catch her in the act, because I knew Karen. She loved being seen. She needed an audience. Her entire power came from the image of control. So I decided to give her a show. I would create a moment so perfect that she'd destroy herself on camera. The plan began with an email. I sent it from an anonymous address, using words that would make her curious. HOA accounting irregularities, urgent. I attached one fake document, showing a missing $20,000 in maintenance funds. I knew she'd panic. She always did when money was involved. Within hours, I saw her shadow outside my porch window, pacing, calling someone, probably her lawyer. That's when I knew the hook was in. That night, I placed the real folder, the one labeled Truth, in my garage. Under the security camera light, I left the door slightly open, as if by mistake. Inside the folder were all the real documents, the proof that could destroy her career and reputation. I made sure she'd hear about it. I even whispered to a few neighbors that I had something big coming for the HOA. I knew gossip would reach her faster than any email ever could. 3 nights later, I saw headlights stop outside my driveway. Karen's white SUV. I crouched in the dark, watching through the camera feed on my phone. She stepped out wearing gloves, glancing around like a thief. She wasn't alone. The man in the dark hoodie again. She whispered something, and he nodded. Then she walked right into my garage. My heart was pounding so hard, I could feel it in my teeth. She opened the folder. I watched her face twist. Part fear, part greed. She took photos, then pulled something from her pocket, a lighter. That's when I realized what she was about to do. She was going to burn it. Destroy the evidence, burn my proof, my work, my name. I wanted to storm out, but I forced myself to wait. The camera caught everything. The flame flickered, touched the edge of the folder, and then she screamed. The lighter had exploded in her hand. The man beside her grabbed her, pulling her out, and they stumbled back into the driveway, dropping everything. The fire spread across the floor, catching on the oil stains. Flames rose fast. My garage was burning again, but this time it wasn't my accident. It was her doing. I ran out yelling her name. The neighbors came out too. They saw the smoke, the chaos, and Karen. Her hand blackened, shaking. She shouted, "He did it. He set me up." But the cameras told a different story. I uploaded everything. The video hit the HOA group chat within an hour. There was no going back. For 2 days, she disappeared. No one saw her car. No one answered her door. Then I got a message. No sender. Just a video file. I opened it. Karen, sitting in her car, bruised, furious, whispering, "You think you've won. You have no idea what you've started." Then the video cut to black. I couldn't sleep that night. Every sound felt like footsteps. Every light flicker looked like her SUV's headlights. I knew she wasn't done. People like Karen never stop when they're cornered. They bite. But I wasn't afraid anymore. The cameras gave me control, and control was power. Coming up, the night she came back, the confrontation that turned violent. And the moment I had to make a choice no man should ever face. Because sometimes winning a war means losing the part of you that made you human. I'm Jack Hayes, And if you've made it this far, you already know that everything I built was burning around me. But what you don't know yet is that the night Karen came back was the night I stopped being just a builder. I became something else. The air that evening felt raw to quiet, like the whole street was holding its breath. The kind of silence that always means trouble is close. My cameras were rolling, the feed open on my phone, and I watched as her SUV crept down the street with its lights off. She was hunting for me. When I stepped outside, the cold hit like a slap. The driveway still smelled of smoke and melted plastic from the last fire. She stood there in the middle of the road, hands tucked into her coat, her bandaged palm glowing under the streetlight. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then she said, calm as ice, "You ruined me, Jack." I answered, "You did that yourself." And that's when she smiled, a thin, broken smile that scared me more than the flames ever did. Because she wasn't angry. She was done pretending. She pulled out her phone and hit record. "Say it again," she whispered. "Say that I ruined myself." I could see the red light blinking. She was baiting me, turning the story around, trying to trap me in her own lie. I took a step closer. "Everyone's seen the footage," I said. "You burned my garage. You stole from your neighbors. It's over." She shook her head slowly. "Not yet. You still have one thing left to lose." And that's when I saw the figure moving behind her. Same man in the hoodie. He circled around the car, and the glint of metal in his hand made my stomach drop. A crowbar. My instincts kicked in. I backed toward the porch, eyes darting between them. "You really want to do this, Karen?" I said, voice shaking but steady enough to be heard. She didn't answer. The man started walking faster. My pulse was a hammer in my throat, then the sound glass shattering. My truck's windshield exploded behind me. It was a warning. They wanted me scared. But fear wasn't what I felt anymore. I felt something colder. I grabbed the closest thing I could find, a steel wrench from under the porch. The cameras caught everything. The light flickered as the man lunged, the crowbar slicing through air. I dodged and swung, hitting the side of the car instead. Sparks flew. Karen screamed his name, Eli, and in that scream, I heard everything: rage, desperation, and something that almost sounded like love. The fight was fast, messy, real. No choreography, just survival. He came at me again, but this time, I didn't back off. I hit him square in the shoulder. He fell, groaning, and I turned to Karen. Her phone was still recording. "Stop," I said. "Enough." But she kept filming. "You're finished, Jack. I'll show everyone what you did." And in that moment, the truth hit me like a punch. It didn't matter what I caught on camera, what I proved. She was never fighting for justice. She was fighting to win, even if that meant burning the world down. So I did the only thing left. I grabbed her phone and threw it against the pavement. It shattered, and the sound was louder than it should have been. Maybe because it was the sound of no turning back. The neighbors started opening their doors, faces half lit in the dark. They saw the wreck, the blood, the fear. Karen looked at me like I'd just handed her my soul. "You'll regret that," she said, voice trembling with hate. Then she ran to her car, dragging the man with her. Tires screeched, lights vanished, and I was left standing there, wrench in hand, sirens echoing somewhere far away. I remember leaning against the porch, breathing hard, realizing that the cameras had caught all of it again. Me fighting, me breaking her phone, me screaming. I wasn't sure anymore who the villain was in this story. Maybe we both were. Maybe the neighborhood had turned us into reflections of each other. Her corruption, my anger. Her control, my defiance. Maybe this place was cursed from the start. Coming up, the moment the police got involved, the twisted version of events Karen would tell, and the impossible choice I was forced to make when they came from me. Because when two stories collide, the truth doesn't matter anymore. Only the one people choose to believe. My name is Jack Hayes, and this is where the war stopped being about property lines and started being about survival. The real kind. The kind where someone always has to lose. And right now, I wasn't sure if I still had anything left to protect. My name is Jack Hayes, and when the police pulled up under the streetlight that night, I thought the hard part was over and that finally someone would see what had really happened. The first officer stepped out, hands on his radio, eyes darting between the scorched garage and the broken phone on the pavement. And for a second I believed the cameras would speak for me. They asked questions with polite tones that hid a verdict. And Karen answered first with a steady voice that had been practiced in meetings and gossip, telling a story where she was the victim and I was the aggressor. I tried to tell the truth, to explain how she had invaded my garage and how the lighter had exploded in her hand. But my words felt thin and useless against the story she told so calmly. My name is Jack Hayes, and I remember the look on the officer's face when he listened to her version and then glanced at me as if he wanted me to beg or cry or something he could catalog as guilt. They took statements, wrote things down, and the words on their forms already bent toward the version that made me look dangerous and unstable instead of cornered and violated. Coming up, the moment the neighborhood turned its back, the whispers in the grocery store, and the way familiar faces started to look like strangers. The next morning the local paper had an online blurb that read like a police press release, rewritten by someone who had only half the story, and neighbors texted me screenshots with small, cruel emojis as if that solved anything. I went door to door, hoping to show the footage, to hand people the folder marked truth, to make the camera see what my memory could not unmake, but doors closed quicker than they used to, and polite smiles froze into avoidance. My name is Jack Hayes, and the house I'd built felt too large and empty when no one would meet my eyes. The HOA emails multiply, not with concern about the assault I had suffered, but with formal notices about conduct and parking and property appearance. And it felt like the system was cleaning me out with paper while Karen cleaned accounts with her pen. Coming up, how the prosecutor ignored the hard evidence, the anonymous calls that started at night, and the moment the first neighbor signed a petition against me. The police eventually said there wasn't enough evidence to arrest anyone, only enough to suggest both parties should keep away from each other, and they filed the report with a quiet finality that felt like a seal being pressed on my life. I spent the next day sleeping in the living room because the bedroom felt too close to where the photo had been taken, and every time my phone buzzed I assumed it was the hooded man or Karen herself. My name is Jack Hayes, and I learned the strange, cold lesson that when systems are co-opted by someone with charisma, truth becomes a private commodity. The HOA voted to start a mediation process, and Karen sat at the table with that same unreadable smile, while neighbors who had once borrowed tools from me asked questions like I was the one who sought favors. Coming up, the files I found in the clerk's office that made my skin crawl, the ledger pages that smelled like betrayal, and the moment I realized evidence could be weaponized against me. I dug deeper because anger without strategy is a house with no foundation. And in the municipal archive, I found copies of invoices with familiar handwriting and contractor names I recognized as ghosts, companies that never came, work that never happened, and checks that traced back through shell accounts to a mailbox Karen used for HOA business. I started to build a narrative that could not be dismissed as whim or revenge. But every time I brought new pages to neighbors' attention, Karen would beat me to the meeting with a story that framed me as a vindictive builder, harassing an honest volunteer. My name is Jack Hayes, and I learned how quickly people choose a simple enemy rather than face a complicated betrayal that involves their own complacency. Meetings that had once been about landscaping and light bulbs turned into theaters, where Karen delivered performances that silenced dissent and rewrote collective memory. Coming up, the lawyer I hired who told me the truth about small-town politics, and the price he said I would pay if I pushed too hard. The lawyer was blunt and not kind about the odds. He said the record looked bad, because the first narrative always sticks. And he warned me that dragging people into court would tear the neighborhood apart and probably destroy what I loved most. I told him I didn't care about odds anymore. I cared about the smell of smoke that had haunted my nights and the photo that proved someone had been inside my house. He agreed to send a cease and desist and to subpoena records. But his first invoice was steep, and my bank calls started, because Karen had somehow convinced a lender to freeze funds for a pending project on a flimsy pretext. My name is Jack Hayes, and the money I thought would protect me turned into another lever Karen pulled from her pocket. I began to sleep with the files under my pillow and to play every camera clip as if a loop of proof could inoculate me against rumor. Coming up, the night someone left a dead animal at my gate and the way terror became a tool in a war of small cruelties. The harassment escalated in ways that made my chest ache. Tires slashed became a pattern. Threatening graffiti appeared on my property, and anonymous emails hinted at secrets only someone with deep access would know. My wife took our child to her mother's for a week because she couldn't take the look the neighbors gave her. She called it self-preservation and said she needed to be sure our child slept without flinching. My name is Jack Hayes, and losing that everyday normalcy felt worse than the legal battles because this fight was devouring the life I had built to keep a family safe. I sat on the porch and watched families walk their dogs past my house with eyes lowered, like no one wanted to catch the contagion of scandal. The HOA board, once a cluster of innocuous volunteers, now moved as an organism that defended its queen, and any motion for an independent audit was tabled or dismissed on procedural grounds. Coming up, the memo that would change everything, the clerk who slipped me a copy, and the choice I had to make at the end of a very long night. The clerk was a woman who had worked at the HOA office for years and who, when she finally met my gaze, looked older than her papers suggested. She handed me a wrapped envelope with shaking hands, and said she feared for her job but could not stand watching the ledger be slaughtered. Inside were scanned statements showing duplicate payments, vendors who never provided receipts, and a trail of money that led to a box of affidavits all signed with the same shaky pen Karen used. When she wrote polite notes, she whispered that some neighbors had been paid small amounts to look the other way, that fear and favors had been the currency of rule, and I felt the room tilt as the scale of the betrayal dropped into place. My name is Jack Hayes, and when I left that office I carried not just paper, but the weight of a decision. Expose everything and risk the collapse of the community, or let the rot continue so people could keep their comfortable faces. Coming up, the petition that appeared in my mailbox and the way the signature of a friend made my stomach twist. I found the petition taped to my door that night, a neat sheet asking the HOA to file for injunction against me, signed by names I had given free coffee and tools to, by people who had once trusted me with their renovations. I stared at those signatures and thought about the cost of truth in a small place, where reputations were currency, and I wondered if exposing Karen would make me the villain in enough stories to stand alone in my ruined street. My name is Jack Hayes, and the hardest part of this whole ordeal was realizing that people will sometimes choose comfort over justice because confronting the rot would mean confronting their own complicity. I called my lawyer and told him we had to move forward. I could not sleep under the same sky, knowing what I knew and doing nothing. He said preparing the case would take months, and that months in which Karen was free meant more damage and more lies layered into the town's memory. Coming up, the summons that would force us both into a courtroom, and the moment the cameras would not be enough. The summons arrived on a gray morning with a wind that slapped the mail against the porch like a warning. And the day the hearing was scheduled, people took sides in whispers that felt like knives. I prepared testimony, lined up witnesses, and rehearsed words until they were tight and sensible. But in the quiet between tasks my chest hollowed with the fear I could not name, that even with proof, human stories are messy and juries are easier to sway than ledgers. My name is Jack Hayes, and the lead up to the hearing felt like walking a bridge that might collapse under the weight of the truth itself. At the courthouse the first day, cameras were there but in limited supply. A local reporter with a microphone asked me to summarize my case in a soundbite, and I spat out a sentence that felt inadequate for the years of smoke and paper and stitched betrayals. The prosecution focused on the fight, not the finances, and Karen's testimony was practiced like a ceremony. She described fear, harassment, and a man she claimed had become violent and unstable. Coming up, the cross-examination that cracked a witness and the defense that almost lost me everything. When one of Karen's witnesses, a contractor whose name appeared on the fake invoices, was called, he trembled under oath and then collapsed when asked about signatures and receipts. His hands shook as he said he'd signed papers because Karen told him it was for administrative simplicity. The look on his face was one of a man finally seeing how small lies had become machinery for someone else's greed, and that moment in the courtroom made some people shift in their seats. I watched faces I'd known for years, and some of them looked like they were about to pledge allegiance to a new version of the truth. My name is Jack Hayes, and when the clerk's office manager testified, stating she had been asked to adjust entries by Karen for years, a cold shiver ran down my spine because it meant the rot had been systemic. Yet even with that testimony, the judge warned us both that in civil disputes like HOA governance the remedy is often paperwork and fines, not dramatic redemption. Coming up, the secret recording I played that changed the mood in the courtroom and the price I paid for playing it. The recording I submitted was blunt and unpolished. Karen on a phone call laughing as she discussed moving money and keeping things quiet. And when the courtroom speaker carried her voice through the room, mouths dropped and a silence heavier than smoke filled the space. People who had once nodded at her in meetings now looked at one another as if waking from a spell, and I felt a small, fragile sense of justice. But the legal machine is slow and loves nuance. Karen's lawyer attacked the tape's authenticity, called chain of custody into question, and painted me as a man obsessed with vengeance who had manufactured a setup. My name is Jack Hayes, and the battle shifted from facts to narrative. I realized that truth alone does not win when cleverness spans how facts appear. The judge ordered further forensic analysis and adjourned the hearing, promising a longer investigation, and the adjournment felt like a pause in a fight rather than a victory. Coming up, the night my garage exploded again and the choice that would force me into the open. That night the neighborhood smelled of smoke and someone's cruelty anew. The second explosion was smaller but precise, aimed to intimidate rather than to kill. And when I stepped into the street with the file in my hands, I understood what the choice would be: retreat into safety and let the system whittle me down, or go public with everything and risk turning the town I loved into an arena where friendships were casualties. My name is Jack Hayes, and in that moment the folder felt heavier than bricks because it held not just evidence, but the moral arithmetic of exposing truth in a place that valued quiet. I walked to the center of the cul-de-sac and set the folder on a table under the streetlight, opened my phone, and began to live stream to anyone who would watch: neighbors, friends, strangers, anyone who might not be in Karen's orbit. I read names, dates, amounts, and I showed the scanned checks and the contracts. My voice shook but did not break. Coming up, the flood of reactions and the knock on my door that would change everything. I do not know which will break this place first, the truth or the fear, but I know I am the one who opened the door, and now I must face what comes next. My name is Jack Hayes, and when I hit that Go Live button, I didn't just start a stream, I started a war. Within seconds, the chat filled with neighbors, friends, usernames I didn't recognize. Some typed words of shock, others disbelief, and a few accused me of being unhinged, desperate, a man trying to save himself with theatrics. But I kept reading the documents aloud, line by line, until the night swallowed my voice. I showed how HOA funds had been siphoned into private accounts, how contractor names matched Karen's relatives, how signatures were copied and pasted from old permits. I said everything the courtroom tried to suppress under pending verification. Coming up, the way the world outside our little neighborhood found out, the news vans that arrived, and the price of finally being heard. The stream went viral faster than I could imagine. Local reporters called within hours, asking for interviews, wanting the files, the recordings, the backstory. A producer from a national network sent an email that started with "Mr. Hayes, we believe this story represents something bigger." My name is Jack Hayes, and for the first time in months, I felt like my voice reached beyond the HOA walls, beyond the locked meetings and whispering neighbors. But victory tastes strange when you've been starving for justice, sweet for a moment, then sharp as glass, because with exposure came retaliation. My lawyer called, furious, saying I had jeopardized the ongoing case, that now everything was in the public domain and Karen's team would argue defamation. The HOA board sent an emergency notice threatening legal action for distribution of confidential materials. Coming up, the morning Karen's mask finally cracked, and the one call that changed everything. The next morning, Karen showed up at my house. No cameras, no smile, just her standing in my driveway, sunglasses hiding the eyes that used to stare down rooms like she owned them. She didn't yell, she whispered. She said I had no idea who I was dealing with, that I'd embarrassed the wrong people. She said she wasn't afraid of court because she had protection, influence, things I couldn't even begin to understand. My name is Jack Hayes, and that was the first time I realized Karen wasn't acting alone. She wasn't just a power-hungry HOA president. She was a gatekeeper for something larger, a network of money, favors, and silence that fed on people's fear of conflict. Coming up, how I found the document that tied everything together, and why it nearly got me killed. 3 days later, I went back to the archive where the clerk had once slipped me that envelope. The office was half empty now. She was gone. Her nameplate had been removed, but in her drawer, under old receipts, I found a USB drive labeled only with a date, the same date the first maintenance invoice had been issued by one of Karen's fake companies. On it were emails, spreadsheets, and payment trails leading not just to Karen, but to 3 other HOA letters across the county, all funneling money into the same offshore account. My hand shook as I opened each file, seeing the pattern repeat like clockwork. The names of property managers, contractors, even city officials appeared in loops of transactions that made my blood run cold. My name is Jack Hayes, and at that moment I understood this wasn't a local corruption story. It was a business model. Coming up, the night I decided to leak it all, and the unmarked car that started following me. The car appeared the same night. Dark SUV, tinted windows, engine running slow behind mine when I drove home. It didn't tailgate, didn't flash lights, just followed. I took 3 turns it shouldn't have taken, and it followed every one. When Ashley pulled into my driveway, it stopped at the end of the street, headlights off. I stood by my door, pretending not to see, but my chest was a drum. I stayed up till morning, refreshing the security footage again and again, and by dawn, I knew what I had to do. My name is Jack Hayes, and fear only works if you believe you're alone. I wasn't anymore. Thousands had seen my stream, hundreds had reached out. I uploaded the USB contents to 3 different journalists and an anonymous forum that specialized in local corruption leaks. I didn't care about lawsuits anymore. I wanted sunlight. Coming up, how the story broke, how the town reacted, and what they tried to do to shut me up for good. When the first headlines hit, HOA president accused of embezzling over $2 million. Local board linked to county-wide corruption ring. The quiet suburb I once called home turned into a war zone of denial and panic. Karen disappeared. Her house was dark, her car gone, mailbox overflowing. People who had once defended her stopped answering calls. The board issued a statement calling me a liar, a mentally unstable individual spreading conspiracy theories. But by then the evidence was out of their control. Reporters camped outside the HOA office. A county investigator confirmed they were opening an audit. My name is Jack Hayes, and for the first time, I thought maybe the nightmare was finally over. Coming up, why I was wrong, and what they did to make sure I paid for the truth. That night, someone broke into my house. They didn't take anything. They just rearranged things. The chair I always sat in was turned toward the window. The family photo was face down on the table. The files I kept in a safe were gone. Not stolen, just replaced with blank pages. It was a message: we can still reach you. I called the police, but they shrugged. No forced entry, no fingerprints, no case. My lawyer told me to move. My wife begged me to leave, but something in me refused. My name is Jack Hayes, and after everything they'd taken, I wasn't about to give them my home too. Coming up, the final confrontation, the moment Karen returned, and what she confessed before disappearing forever. She showed up at dusk, just like before. Same driveway, same silence. No SUV this time, no sunglasses, just exhaustion. She looked older, smaller, stripped of the power that used to armor her. She said the others had abandoned her, that the money was gone, that she'd been left to take the fall. She said she never meant for it to go this far, that it started as a favor, a small adjustment for a friend on the city council, and then grew, one forgery at a time, until it became too big to stop. I asked her why she framed me, why she made me the monster in her story. She looked up and said, "Because you were the only one who would have kept digging." Then she handed me a flash drive, turned, and walked away into the dark. My name is Jack Hayes, and I never saw her again. The flash drive held what was left of their empire: final ledgers, fake IDs, and a recording of a city official laughing about suburban tax farms. I turned everything over to the investigators. Months passed. Arrests were made. The HOA dissolved. The neighborhood tried to pretend it had never happened. Some people apologized. Most didn't. They just painted over the cracks, planted new flowers, smiled at me like they hadn't once voted me out. But I knew better. My name is Jack Hayes, and the thing about truth is, it doesn't fix what's broken. It just exposes it. Coming up, the new HOA being formed, the fresh start, and the question that still haunts me: when corruption wears a friendly face, how long before it moves back in next door? I'm Jack Hayes, and the morning after the exposure felt like walking through a city that had suddenly learned to breathe. The news had hit every corner of the county, and my phone buzzed constantly. Messages, emails, calls. Some were congratulations, some were warnings, and some were silent threats that made my skin crawl. I stepped outside to see neighbors standing on their porches, watching me like I had become a new species. Some waved, most turned away. I had won, but the victory was strange, bitter, and heavy. The HOA office was locked. Karen was gone, and yet, the chaos she had started wasn't over. The local reporter who had covered every development came by, microphone in hand, camera crew trailing behind. "Jack," she said, "can you describe what it feels like to expose corruption that runs this deep?" I told her the truth. It's exhausting, terrifying, and lonely. My name is Jack Hayes, and for weeks I replayed every confrontation in my head, every lie, every burned document, every moment Karen had tried to make me look like the villain. I realized then that exposing someone like her doesn't end the story. It only starts the next chapter of consequences. Some neighbors called meetings to discuss what had happened. They were quiet, nervous, unsure where to place their loyalty. I stood in front of them, holding copies of the ledgers, the emails, the recordings. "Look at this," I said. "This is why everything collapsed. Not me. Not my anger. Not the fights. It was all built on lies, manipulation, and theft." People whispered to each other. Some faces turned red. Some avoided eye contact. A few finally nodded, their hands trembling as they reached for the documents. Coming up, the moment a neighbor who had once been loyal to Karen finally spoke, and the tension that followed nearly made me drop everything. The first confession came from a woman who had volunteered with Karen for years. I signed papers," she admitted, voice low. "I didn't know they were fake. I thought it was normal bookkeeping." Every word she said felt like a hammer striking the walls of the neighborhood. My name is Jack Hayes, and I realized the real damage wasn't just what Karen had done, but what she had forced others to do. Willingly or not, I held back my anger. I could see the shame in their eyes, and for a moment, I felt pity. Then I remembered all the nights I had spent awake, the fires, the threats, the broken trust. Pity was a luxury I couldn't afford. Coming up, the revelation that one of the most trusted neighbors had been actively sabotaging me. And the way I found out almost cost me everything. The truth hit like a punch. One of the neighbors I had helped build a deck, fix a roof, someone I trusted completely, had signed the petition to block me from HOA meetings. They had quietly gathered signatures and convinced others that I was dangerous, that I was unstable, that my fight against Karen was personal rather than righteous. I stared at the papers, my hands shaking. My name is Jack Hayes, and betrayal has a sound, like paper tearing, voices whispering, and neighbors suddenly looking at you as though you were the enemy. I confronted them, and they denied everything at first, then broke down. "I thought it was for the neighborhood," they said. "I didn't know it would go this far." Their fear, their justification, it didn't matter anymore. They had made their choice. Meanwhile, Karen's name appeared in court records across multiple counties. Investigations were launched, arrests were made. Some contractors faced charges for fraud, and city officials were suspended. The news cycles called it HOA Scandal of the Year. I read the headlines, my heart pounding. Part of me wanted to feel relief, but another part felt hollow. My name is Jack Hayes, and when the world celebrates a victory, the cost is not always visible. I had lost trust, peace, and the idea that my neighborhood would ever be the same. Coming up, the night I returned home to find a final message from Karen, and the dread that followed me through the streets. It came one evening, delivered by an anonymous courier, a plain envelope with nothing written on it. Inside was a photo of Karen, sitting in her car, watching me from across the street. A single line was scribbled on the back: "You think it's over, Jack. It's never over." I felt a chill run through me. My name is Jack Hayes, and I realized that exposing someone like her doesn't end with legal action, it ends with vigilance, with knowing they are always out there, waiting for a slip. The community slowly started to recover. Some neighbors apologized, some never did. Gardens were replanted, fences repaired, driveways cleared. The trust had been burned away like asphalt in the sun. I walked through the streets I had built, noticing things I had never seen before. Small acts of kindness, quiet smiles, and also worry eyes, people measuring every word, every glance. I understood then that fallout is more than consequences for the guilty. It is the emotional landscape reshaped for everyone. Coming up, how I rebuilt my own sense of control, the small victories that mattered most, and the decision I had to make about Karen once and for all. I began documenting everything, keeping logs, cameras, and notes. I rebuilt fences stronger, replaced locks, planted security lights, but also reached out to neighbors who had stood with me. My name is Jack Hayes, and I learned that after chaos, restoration is not about erasing what happened, it's about choosing what to protect, what to nurture, and who to trust. Every evening, I walked the streets, remembering the fire, the betrayal, the exposure. And I knew I would never let complacency return. Even with all the investigations, legal victories, and confessions, the psychological toll remained. I felt the weight of every look, every whisper, every action that Karen had set in motion. My name is Jack Hayes, and the neighborhood may have survived, but my peace had to be rebuilt brick by brick, just like the homes I had constructed. The tension, the dread, and the knowledge that someone like Karen could rise again lingered, like a shadow over every porch light. Coming up, the last confrontation, the shocking confession, and the moment I finally closed this chapter of my life. I'm Jack Hayes, and when I saw Karen again, it wasn't in court, it wasn't in meetings, it wasn't in emails. It was on the street I had built with my own hands, where the asphalt smelled of summer heat and fresh paint from months ago. She stepped out of the shadows, no SUV this time, no backup, no performance, just Karen, pale, tired, and something fragile in her posture that I had never seen before. My hands twitched at my sides. I had rehearsed this confrontation 1,000 times in my head, but nothing could prepare me for the weight of seeing her standing there, human and fallible, without her armor of arrogance. She looked at me, her eyes flicking over the street, the homes, the camera feeds that still ran on my porch. "Jack," she whispered, "I never wanted it to go this far. My name is Jack Hayes, and the thing about confrontation is that it demands honesty, even when you don't want it." "Then why, Karen?" I asked. "Why drag this neighborhood into chaos? Why put me through fire?" She swallowed hard, shaking. "Because no one ever stopped me. No one questioned. I wanted control, and when you pushed back, I didn't know how to stop myself." Coming up, the moment she revealed the depth of her schemes, and the choice I would have to make that night. She stepped closer. I could smell the coffee and faint perfume she had used for morning meetings, and the contrast made her confession surreal. "It started small," she said. "Just a favor here, a signature there." I rationalized it. I told myself I was helping the HOA, but it grew. Jack. It grew into something I couldn't manage, something I couldn't undo without losing everything. "And you," her voice cracked, "you refused to play along. You refused to ignore the truth. You made me realize how rotten it was." My name is Jack Hayes, and every word she said hit like a hammer against the walls I had built inside myself. Her hand shook as she produced an envelope from her coat. "I tried to hide this," she said, voice trembling, "but you deserve it." I took it cautiously. Inside were records I hadn't yet seen. Bank statements, ledgers, emails, every last piece of evidence of her corruption. My heart raced. I knew this could end her, end everything, finally. And yet, as I held the papers, I felt a strange weight settle on my chest. Victory was here, but it was bitter. Coming up, the moment I realized that exposing her fully could destroy more than her. It could destroy the neighborhood I had worked for years to build. I looked up at her. "Karen, this can go to the authorities. It can end with arrests, but the neighborhood, people will be divided forever. Families, friendships, all of it." She nodded slowly, tears in her eyes. "I know, and I accept it." I took a deep breath. My name is Jack Hayes, and the choice I had to make was cruel. Either let justice take its full course, or limit it to preserve what little peace could remain. My hands hovered over the papers. Every second felt like hours. Coming up, the decision that would define me, and the consequences I didn't expect. Finally, I spoke. "We do it my way," I said. "We give these to the investigators, but we also present a plan to the neighborhood to repair, to rebuild trust, to mitigate the fallout." Karen stared at me. "You're sparing me?" she whispered. I nodded. My name is Jack Hayes, and sparing her wasn't mercy. It was strategy, humanity, and a recognition that sometimes winning is not about destroying the opponent, but about protecting the larger whole. We walked together to my house, the envelope between us. She did not speak again until we reached the porch. "Jack, thank you," she said quietly. I said nothing. The cameras still ran, the feeds capturing the moment in every angle. I knew someone would see the truth, not just the confrontation, but the choice. That was more powerful than any legal victory. Coming up, the aftermath, the reconciliation, and the way the neighborhood began to heal. Over the next few days, Karen turned herself in for questioning. The investigators reviewed every document she had handed over. The media followed, And for once, my name was attached to truth and resolution rather than chaos. My neighbors slowly began to acknowledge what had happened, some with apologies, some with hesitant gratitude. My name is Jack Hayes, and the lesson became clear. Confrontation doesn't end with anger. It ends with clarity and courage. Yet, every night, I walked the streets I had built and remembered her eyes, the tremble in her voice, the danger of the choices we make when power goes unchecked. The neighborhood survived, the HOA was dissolved, and reconstruction began. But some scars remained, unspoken, invisible, lingering. I understood then that fallout lasts longer than victory. Coming up, the final closure, the shocking revelation, and what I finally did with the neighborhood I built. By the time the sun set, Karen's name had lost its power in the community. People no longer whispered, no longer voted on petty rules. They rebuilt fences, painted houses, and even planted flowers I had recommended years ago. My name is Jack Hayes, and watching life return, I realized that sometimes the hardest confrontation is not with your opponent, but with your own desire for vengeance versus your responsibility to protect what matters. In the end, I did what I had to do. I filed all documents with the proper authorities, ensured Karen faced justice, but also implemented a plan to guide the community forward. The cameras, the ledger, the USB drives, they became tools of restoration rather than weapons of revenge. And in the quiet that followed, as neighbors waved hello without fear or suspicion, I felt a strange peace. My name is Jack Hayes, and the final confrontation had not been about victory or revenge. It had been about choosing what kind of man I wanted to be. Coming up, the closure of the story, and the lesson that lingers long after the neighborhood has healed. My name is Jack Hayes. The streets are quiet tonight. The houses glow under their porch lights. Everything looks normal. To normal, I built this neighborhood. Every brick, every corner, every shadow. And yet, I feel uneasy. The air tastes different. Like the calm before a storm. I walk slowly. The wind whistles through the trees. Leaves swirl at my feet. I think about Karen. About the fights. About the lies. About the fire. I wonder if people will ever see the full truth. My name is Jack Hayes, and I know the truth is heavier than any brick I ever laid. I stop at the end of the cul-de-sac. I look around. The street is empty. The houses stare back at me. Silent witnesses. I think about power. How it corrupts. How it hides in plain sight. How one person can make everyone bend. And how one person can undo it. I think about me. About the choices I made. About the moments I could have walked away but didn't. About the nights I barely slept. My hands shake. I breathe slowly. I whisper to myself, did I do the right thing? The street swallows my words. No answer comes, only silence. The neighbors, some returned to normal, some disappeared, some pretended nothing happened. I pass the old garage. The soot is gone. The smell lingers, a faint memory of fire, of anger, of revenge. I touch the door, cold, solid. I remember the night she screamed. The night I almost lost control. My name is Jack Hayes, and I realize I have carried that night inside me ever since. Coming up, or maybe not coming up. You don't always get answers. Sometimes you just get consequences. I walk back home. The porch light flickers. I glance at the cameras. They record. Always recording. Watching. Waiting. I feel their gaze. Not human. Not alive. Just present. Observing. Judging. Maybe protecting. Maybe plotting. My name is Jack Hayes, and sometimes I wonder if the neighborhood itself has learned something from all of this. Something dangerous. Something I can't control. I sit in my living room. The files are gone. Every document accounted for. The evidence delivered. The authorities satisfied. The neighbors appeased. Karen, gone. Or is she? I sip water. My hands still tremble. The silence presses down. My name is Jack Hayes. I think about fire, betrayal, exposure, and the choices that shape a man. I think about what it means to win, and whether winning is ever enough. I hear a sound, soft, from outside. A car, footsteps, nothing. The night stretches. My eyes scan the windows. The street is empty. My neighbor's asleep. The wind continues to whistle. I tell myself it's nothing, just imagination. My name is Jack Hayes, and I know better. The porch light goes out, just for a second, then back on. I blink. Heart hammers. The shadows seem thicker, denser. Watching. Waiting. I rise. Step outside. The air is still. Too still. I scan the street. No one. No car. No movement. But a note lies at my feet. White. Crisp. No writing. No marks. Just. There. My hands reach down. I pick it up. My fingers tremble. The paper feels cold. Ice cold. My name is Jack Hayes, and my stomach drops. Before I can open it, a sound erupts behind me. Glass shatters, loud, violent. From the neighbor's house, or my own. I spin. The wind carries nothing. Nothing I can see, only a faint echo. I stumble backward, heart racing. I clutch the note. My mind races. My name is Jack Hayes, and in that instant, the world tilts. Everything goes silent. Then, a shadow passes across the street, fast. Impossible. No sound. No explanation. Just there. Gone. My breath catches. I stumble. My hands drop the note. I look down. It's blank, but I know. I know it's not empty. My name is Jack Hayes, and I realize something irreversible just happened. Something that changes everything. Something that I cannot undo. The street stays quiet. Too quiet. My neighbor's lights flicker. I hear nothing. Nothing but the pulse in my ears. My heart. My mind. My name is Jack Hayes, and I feel it. That the night is no longer mine. That the neighborhood I built has shifted, changed, watched, waiting. I take a step back toward the house. The front door clicks, locked, but I didn't touch it. My name is Jack Hayes. The cameras, the files, the fights, the exposures. All of it now feels irrelevant. There is only the shadow, only the silence, only the impossible. And then, a sound, soft, from inside. Not my house, not any house I can see, but inside. Something moved, something alive, something patient. My name is Jack Hayes, and I understand one thing in that moment. It's not over. Not really. And then, a single flash, bright, blinding, a sound I can't describe. The ground trembles. My vision spins. The note flies from my hand. The street disappears under a new darkness. And that's it. Nothing else.